A warm greeting to all of you who are gathered here for this important event. Mrs. Machaille Al Naimi, President of Qatar Foundation Community Development, Mr. Abdulrahman Al Ishaq, Head of Public Art at Qatar Museums, colleagues from Qatar Foundation who, along with our facilities team, really did a great job at finding a location where this wall can stand. Colleagues, students, welcome. Thank you for coming today to remember and stand with us to mark this important piece of history. We are honored to be selected as one of two sites to display a piece of the Berlin Wall here in Doha. As a university, we are dedicated to training future leaders who will engage in building international relations. And we are dedicated to conducting research that tears down walls on a number of fronts. And artifacts like this remind us of the critical importance of our task as educators and leaders in the area of diplomacy. Qatar's partnership with Germany is a prime example of international diplomacy at work. And here we see the fruits of exchange that will provide ongoing mutual enrichment for years to come. There are so many debates about the building of walls, barriers that keep people out, separating us from the other or the haves from the have-nots. The Berlin Wall was built in 1961 to keep people in. Those who wanted to escape communist West Berlin to East Berlin, to escape communist East Berlin to West Berlin, which was under democratic rule. Between 1961 and 1989, the East German government changed the design of the barrier 4 times along many sections of the border strip. Border Wall 75, and this sample is the last sample, the most recent design, was erected from 1975 to 76 on. A decision was taken to erect a construction that would form a completely insurmountable barrier. Refugees found it almost impossible to climb over this wall. The numbers of people who could escape from East Germany to West Germany drastically decreased. But just when it looked as if the wall loomed large and was impossible to cross, the thirst for freedom, the desire to reach across artificial borders, drove people on both sides of the wall to tear it down. And as of this year, the wall has now been down for longer than it stood. To be exact, 10,316 days. The wall did keep people in, but the true tragedy was that it separated people from their families and their loved ones. It is the human aspect behind the big events that matter. At Georgetown University in Qatar, we study politics and history and economics and culture because we care about the human condition. We want to help develop leaders who understand both the power of the people and the power of individual agents to affect change. Armed with fluency in multiple languages, negotiations and communication skills, an understanding of economics and historical knowledge, our graduates are prepared to do today what Edmund A. Walsh hoped that they would at the inauguration of the School of Foreign Service 100 years ago, to use his words, to cope with and effectively solve the problems of tomorrow. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 is still a recent memory for most adults living today. Our generation, at least. We have with us today 2 people profoundly and personally affected by these events. Dr. Kai Henrik Barth and his wife, Katrin Schultz Barth. They grew up on different sides of the wall. Katrin on the eastern side and Kai on the western side. They never would have met had the wall not come down that fateful Thursday, November 9th, 1989. The wall's impact was tremendous. It divided German families, ruptured society, and affected the entire world far beyond the wall. By reflecting on and honoring those memories, we remember the cost of physical separation. the cost of ideological division, the cost of barriers, whether they are made of concrete, barbed wire, or canals, or drawn in ink. The history books say the wall opened on one strange night in November of that year, but that's not quite right. This is what Mark Fisher, the Washington Post Berlin bureau chief, wrote in 1989. He continued to write, "It was really a process that took several months, a process that consisted of the physical destruction of the wall, countless changes in people's daily routines, and the mental shift that was perhaps the biggest hurdle of all." What we can take away from those memories is a determination to help prevent another separation wall in another place from coming up. To succeed, we have to understand why it was ever built and what it took to bring it down. We study politics, economics, and culture. We conduct research on critical events, knowing that a history we do not know is a history we're bound to repeat. Here at Georgetown, we have remarkable scholars doing this work, asking the questions that haven't been asked, and hopefully contributing to a global body of knowledge that will inspire the next generation of students who may find themselves standing before the same section of the Berlin Wall. We exist in a unique ecosystem here in Qatar Foundation, composed of many other powerful thinkers from some of the top universities in the world. The work we do together is a constant reminder to all of us that the walls that are erected to separate us will not stand. We are encouraged to come together to collectively work towards making a difference through the determined work of people like Mrs. Machaille Al Naimi, who worked with Qatar Museums to make this event possible. Today, we will hear from Mrs. Naimi, from Mr. Al Ishaq. We will then follow with a brief synopsis of the historical significance of the wall from our own Professor Gerd Noneman, who's a professor of international relations and Gulf studies. And then we will close, I think, very appropriately and adequately with personal reflections from Kai and Catherine. But first, I would like to invite Mrs. Naimi and Mr. Al Ishaq to unveil the wall.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here with you today to mark the latest successful art collaboration between Qatar Foundation and Qatar Museums, the hosting of the segment of a Berlin Wall at Education City. When you stand next to this artwork, you truly feel the hand of history on your shoulder. It is more than a piece of stone, it is a piece of a story that is a pivotal time in our world's journey. And whilst, as you said, most adults remember it, a lot of us do remember it, even though we were much younger at that stage. It's one that continues to resonate almost 3 decades on. It is an artwork that invites people to do more than look. It invites them to gather, to think, explore, and expand their knowledge. It connects them with history and cultural identity. And in this way, it perfectly complements the 150 artworks that represent Qatar Foundation's unique art collection, and those kindly on loan to us from Qatar Museums, all of which are in public view here at Education City within our various assets. These pieces of art encourage critical thinking, creativity, and discovery. They promote social engagement and interaction, and they foster cross-cultural understanding and perspective. All of these values are a core to us within Qatar Foundation and our mission, and that is why art has such a central role to play, particularly within community development. We are immensely proud to host this artwork within our community, and particularly within Georgetown University. I can't stress enough that as we were debating the location of this art piece, we couldn't think of a better place. When I found that it was going to be at Georgetown, we were tremendously happy, given the nature of the work that you do and the leaders that you are creating future generations. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Qatar Museums sincerely for enabling us to do so, and for our ongoing and valued contribution. Thank you very much.
I'd like to start off by thanking Qatar Foundation for facilitating this collaboration. We could say it's been a good collaboration so far. We had, before the Berlin Wall, we had the Damien Hirst babies as the last unveiling or official inauguration. And we're happy to work with the Qatar Foundation as a leader that creates change in Doha. I would like also to thank Georgetown for becoming the new home for the Berlin Wall. In Qatar Museums, we take great care in selecting the piece and where we place the piece. So we hope that having a piece of history in Qatar Museums, in Georgetown, Qatar, would inspire the students who will become the leaders of tomorrow, and hopefully break walls instead of building walls and create bridges with other cultures. Thank you so much.
So I'm not going to talk very long because I think by far the most important for everybody's future memories will be the personal witness that Kai and Katrin will be able to give you. As it happens, only yesterday in class, in a first-year class, I had occasion to mention the Berlin Wall. And a few weeks ago, an upper level class, similarly, the Berlin Wall became a subject of brief discussion. And it struck me that while even at the upper class levels, people heard about it and read something about it, and even more so, but even more so this was true for the first years, it was very vague. And there was very little personal connection and realization. For people of that generation, it's virtually inconceivable that such a separation existed in the heart of Europe, running all across Europe. And the Berlin part of that division was a peculiar one, because Berlin, of course, as a city, city region, was located inside the Soviet zone. And so within Berlin, there was the western part and the Soviet-occupied part. The idea that that was such a real, tangible division running through Europe, people might have read about it in history books, but it didn't seem to come across as very real or even conceivable. Just so, for people of our generation, we're perhaps not the majority of the world's population these days anymore, but I would say 60% of the world's population, what the picture I just described obtains. For the rest of us, this was an incredible moment when that wall came toppling down, and everything that happened around it. The toppling of the wall was not a single event, as Dallal explained. There was a lot going on across the world, but across Europe. It was regimes that were crumbling. It was ideologies that were losing some of their confidence that they could contain the people within such walls. This, at that time, caused real euphoria. I myself, at the time, was in my second year of my academic career as a young lecturer, professor, they would say, in American context, teaching international relations. And I genuinely was enthused about the possibility of people power, the apparent changes that were taking place in the international system and in the understanding, international understanding as well as local understanding of politics. That the old, fierce but brittle regimes proved just that, brittle. And it was impossible to contain the kind of energy of populations. That also led to a complete restructuring of the international system. You know, apart from people's feelings, the wall was a symbol, a mere symbol, it was division made visible, but it was also the structure of the international system made visible, the structure that had obtained since the end of the Second World War. It's at the end of the Second World War, you get these two main ideological powers and military powers meeting each other in Germany and across the rest of Europe, leading to the division of Europe. And in a sense, the division of the rest of the world and world politics into what people became used to calling the two blocks, right? The Western bloc and the Soviet bloc. And then there was a third group of nations that people ended up calling the Third World. That division that structured almost anything in international affairs was, of course, created at the end of the Second World War. But for people of our generation and our parents, that division became a given, something that was just unquestioned, inconceivable that it would ever change. And in a very short space of time, it did. So hence the euphoria, the sense of possibility for the future, the sense of finally the United Nations was going to be unleashed properly for the good of mankind. How naive did that prove, right? We're now back in a time of building walls. In one particular part of the world, building walls is already very, very extensive, of course, not too far from here in Palestine. And populism and the kind of nastier sides of nationalism are popping up all around the place. So it's no longer, for the first few years, the euphoria was translated into some very serious academic analysis too, and sort of popular academic analysis. We all probably heard of the title, The End of History. Francis Fukuyama, a brilliant mind, wrote this book about the end of history. Right, that's it. We've arrived. It's liberal democracy from here on, clearly. The other counter systems or ideologies can't compete. It wasn't quite that simple, as Fukuyama himself fairly swiftly admitted and realized. So while the end of that division, symbolized by the falling of the wall, restructured the international system again, first towards what seemed to be a unipolar world, and then to a multipolar world that we're still with, it also kind of opened up all sorts of possibilities. And there weren't just positive ones, there were also negative ones. And some of the negative possibilities we're now seeing being realized. But at the same time, I think we mustn't lose sight of the fact that those regimes that made the building of a wall like this possible did crumble. Similarly, even though events like the Arab Spring were in some ways of a similar nature, brittle but fierce regimes ultimately no longer being able to sustain either the politics or the economics of their systems fell for a while. The fact that we're now in a counter-revolutionary period, certainly in the Arab world, shouldn't make us give up hope altogether. I still believe that the evidence is plentiful to show that populations can't be kept down without end. So there will be another falling of walls. We'll go back to a situation, inshallah, where the building of walls is no longer going to be as popular as it is under certain presidents these days.
Dear Dean Dallal, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My wife, Katrin Scholz-Barth, and I are very happy to have this opportunity to share our story with you. We are a real East German, reunified German couple. And you have no idea how nervous I am standing next to a piece of the wall that means so much to us. We wrote our speech out so that we wouldn't fail in an attack of emotions next to this piece. So let me continue. The Berlin Wall collapsed on November 9, 1989, rather accidentally, signaling the end of the separation of Germany into East and West. It was a defining moment, and I guess that many in the room, in the audience, remember exactly where they were on this particular Thursday evening in 1989. This historic event is deeply ingrained into the lives of the two of us, actually very much to this day. We watched recently original footage of the day of jubilant East Germans crossing into West Berlin and happy West Berliners celebrating their arrival. It has a powerful emotional impact on us, even after nearly 30 years. Without the fall of the wall, we would have never met. My wife grew up in East Germany, I grew up in West Germany. There was no way we would have been able to meet if the wall wouldn't have come down. Please.
So our story is quite unique in that it is a result of growing up on an inner German border that was neither one of our fault. But during the Cold War, you remember in the early 80s, it was quite a scary time because the US started to deploy Pershing II missiles in West Germany. And the Russians deployed and stationed SS-20 rockets on the East German border of it, basically preparing for nuclear war on German soil. And we would have faced each other, fighting each other in the event of that. So these scary times, when we were in our early or later teens, shaped us to this day. And it's not only politically that it shaped us, it also basically informed our later career choices. For Kai to focus his life on nuclear non-proliferation, and for me to make sustainable development my life's mission. And so while East Germans were keenly aware of the omnipresent Stasi, the East German secret police, and their informants all among us, I still remember a very happy childhood with family vacations, summer camps, sports, and music within very close-knit and strong supportive communities. And when the wall fell in November 1989, these strong communities actually extended beyond the walls as millions of people streamed to the opposite Germany that they had never known or seen before. Either side was warmly welcomed by the other, and that was just really beautiful. And ironically, I had actually missed all of the excitement. As an East German competitive swimmer, I was head underwater during the time, and I only learned about the world-changing events unfolding in front of us the next day at university when I was wondering where everybody was. So that evening, a day late, I actually jumped on a ferry to go to Denmark. I lived in Rostock on the Baltic Sea, and because the very few streets that did exist going west were choked on overwhelmed border crossings, I was myself with a lot of truckers on a ferry going to Denmark, making my way around to Hamburg, where Kai and I ultimately met in an art gallery, of all places. So it's coming full circle that we appreciate that we have here the opportunity to actually welcome this piece of art, and that Qatar Museums and Qatar Foundation has donated it to Georgetown for that very reason. Now, at this point, I might want to point out that this wall did not start as a piece of art. It was a scar between East and West, and the only reason why it became public art was because the people on the west side of Berlin could actually go all the way to it and painted it and expressed themselves. Now you might notice when you come around that there is no such thing on the east side, on the side that's facing east, because for us it was a death trap. It was over 100 meters of self-shooting devices that would have cost our lives if we just dared to paint the wall.
I think it's also important to realize that we spoke the same language, German, but we didn't understand each other's cultural references.
Wait, now I need to say something. Before Kai...
The East-West German thing never ends.
Before Kai makes those cultural references, I might want to say, I will gladly admit that I did not know any of the cultural references or the cultural icons, but Kai didn't know or wouldn't consider that the East had produced any icons of East Germany by itself, but boy was he wrong.
So I want to give you a little anecdote. She didn't know Marilyn Monroe, she didn't know Blues Brothers, so I explained what the Blues Brothers are. The Blues Brothers are two guys in black suits. enough said. Then we walked past a toy store, totally decorated in Batmans, and she said, "Is this one of the Blues Brothers?" So I wasn't quite sure whether this was serious or not. And I have to say that this is not unusual for a unified East-West German couple, that you get these different references. My wife pointed out that I didn't know much about East Germany. This was absolutely true. For me, East Germany was a black hole in a map. I grew up 10 miles away from the border, and I didn't care about East Germany because there was no way of ever traveling there. There was no way of meeting people from East Germany in any normal way. And so we basically discounted, my generation discounted East Germany. And suddenly you have this influx of excited young people from East Germany into West Germany. It was a very heady time.
So 3 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Kai and I had both finished our master's degrees in our respective universities, and then we moved to the United States. And we married in the United States, and ever since thank Mikhail Gorbachev for allowing this wall to be dismantled without one single shot fired. I was among the lucky ones because at age 22 at the time, with a curious open mind, I grasped the opportunity to see the world. But generations younger or older were caught right in the middle. So the generation of my parents, for instance, they fought to hold on to their own identities. Children who were younger were suddenly faced with difficulties and uncertainties that nobody in East Germany had ever known before. So, but overall, East Germany was quite lucky because 1989 went down in history as the year of revolution. On April 9th, 1989, exactly to the day 6 months prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall, was the Tbilisi massacre, where several hundred people died in an anti-Soviet uprising. And probably not very many people remember that. More memorable in our conscious probably are the events on Tiananmen Square on June 1989, where also several hundred people were killed trying to build a more democratic China, which failed. And so pieces of this Berlin Wall remind us of the emotional events in 1989, and we remember with deep gratitude that we are actually part of one of the happiest moments of post-war Germany. And as former German Chancellor Willy Brandt once said, now what belongs together will grow together.
One little picture of the happiest moment. The happiest moment came to the fore at New Year's Eve party in 1989 in Berlin around the Brandenburg Gate. More than 1.5 million people were celebrating the prospect of unification, the opening of the wall. But the physical structure of the wall was still there. The border guards were still on duty. But the border guards would be celebrating with everybody else too. So for many West Germans, it was the first time that they could walk through the Brandenburg Gate into East Germany. I did this with all these other masses as well. I was far into East Germany when suddenly many police cars arrived with blue emergency lights and sirens, and unbeknownst to us, there was a scaffolding collapsed and people got injured, but we didn't know this. So we were in East Berlin, deep into East Berlin. Police cars arrived, and somebody was screaming, "They're closing the wall." This was the fastest mile I ever ran. But love trumps fear. Next morning, I crossed the border again to visit her.
So this is just our very personal story, and again, we're deeply grateful to Qatar Foundation, Qatar Museums, Georgetown University, and for you to share this moment with us. But everyone in here has their very own personal stories of challenges, of unimaginable, unexpected, and quite beautiful moments in your lives that make your own story. And so we hope, and our wish is that with this piece of the Berlin Wall right here at Georgetown University that educates the next generations of world leaders will be a constant reminder of finding common ground, not only interculturally, but interpersonally on every single day to make this world a better place, and be, again, something to remind us to tear down any other wall around us. Thank you very much.